I thought it would be really important to hear directly from patients and families about what this meant and to share with us all what it is we're thinking about when we talk about precision medicine. And as you'll hear, we're going to really show quite a continuum of what this can mean for patients and families as we talk about precision medicine. So at Cincinnati, what we're trying to do is really develop learning networks, multi-site collaborations of patients, families, clinical teams, and researchers who use data for improvement, discovery, research, and innovation. This is modeled on the Learning Health System model framed by the IOM several years ago. Currently, we support 5 networks, 3 national chronic care networks, Improve Care Now, which is PPRN and part of PCORNet, 1 on juvenile idiopathic arthritis, 1 on complex congenital heart disease, 1 a national safety network, and a regional perinatal network. We also have several networks in design, working with the Autism Treatment Network and the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation to adapt existing networks into learning networks. We're also developing from scratch a renal transplant and sickle cell network. These involve collaborations among patients, families, clinicians, and researchers. They repurpose clinical data for both improvement and research, and the 5 core networks have all achieved improved health outcomes. There are 350 teams at 244 sites, 45 states and DC, and then the US, UK, and Canada. I was on a call this morning with folks in Sweden about how could we potentially set up a learning network node among the Swedish pediatric physicians. And as you know, they have registries in place there. Just within the last week, Don Berwick published in JAMA a commentary that I'd recommend to you all, 2 pages long, and he talks about what is Era 3 for medicine and healthcare. He gives 9 components of that, and I flipped some of these. Because of this panel, I put the first one as hear the voices of the people served. And that's really what we're trying to do today. He talked about measuring what matters, using improvement science, ensuring complete transparency with data. And then I think some of what was talked about earlier about costs, he talks about business strategy from revenue to quality and rejecting greed, protecting civility, and some other things you can read there. It's a great 2-page read and really very inspiring. So for the next hour are 5 presentations by 5 people. And then what we wanted to do was leave the majority of time for discussion. What I'd like to do is start with Breck Gamble, who's the mother of 3 children, one of whom, Bennett, has cystic fibrosis. Breck and I met at a CF design meeting about 10 months ago. She's become a close Facebook friend and someone who's always inspiring to me. And we wanted to just share with you what it's like in the family of someone with cystic fibrosis.
My name is Bennett, and I'm 5 years old. I have cystic fibrosis. Cystic fibrosis is where mucus gets stuck in your lung. Mucus gets locked up. The hair gets locked up by the mucus, and so it can't move. Like, pretend this is the hair, and now it can't move. You push the water out and help the air go through. That's why it's hard for him. Bennett's lungs, he has mucus, in them, and he can't breathe that well. So the best. It shakes your body up. It shakes it like this. So inside the lungs, it'll go like, and then it'll come out. It makes me think I can't really play. Like, I can't move my guys. You do it so it can shake it up, well, and also can fight the bad germs away. My vest makes me feel better. A mask, it makes me get to breathe more and gets healthier more. It makes smoke.
It makes smoke?
Of it's like breathing in air, but the air, like, you have to breathe a lot of it at a time and stuff, like almost every second. It's hard to do that. I don't like to do that. That's why, but I know it's hard for Bennett. It's hard for him to breathe in every second. I just thought about it and it made me sad. I take them because that's how I get more energy. I have to take my insulin because my body doesn't work right. Because it makes me scared sometimes. I don't like going to cystic fibrosis clinic because sometimes I'm scared there too. Yeah, it makes me kind of hurting my throat. That's to this check if you have any germs. I don't like it.
Close your mouth. Take a big breath in. Then blow. Blow, 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 blow. Good job. Give me a 5. Good job.
Oh, the thing I don't like about cystic fibrosis is he has to go to the doctor a lot. Well, you have some sad times. You would have some happy times. That's what it's like to be a big brother with a little kid that has cystic fibrosis.
You had a peek into my family's life and my world with cystic fibrosis and my 2 little boys. Part of the reason that we wanted to share my story in this way is because it really allows you to come into our living room and hear from my kids, from their words, what's going on and how important precision medicine really is for our life and being able to affect us in a positive way.
Thanks. It turns out that Breck and my niece attended journalism school at Mizzou, so Breck was the one who put all that together, and it's just really wonderful. So thanks, Breck. Kirsten is going to talk with us. Kirsten is 25 years old. She has cystic fibrosis. Kirsten, I wonder if you could tell us a bit about your family and your activity in high school.
Yeah, absolutely. So my course with cystic fibrosis has been very similar to what you saw in Breck's video. So I'm 25 years old. I was diagnosed at 3.5 years old. very soon before my younger brother was born. I now have 2 younger brothers, both of whom have cystic fibrosis as well. So it's a family affair for us. I fortunately have 2 parents who are very medically savvy and understood that a lot of the battle of CF is in prevention and making sure we stay healthy. So, and as a child and in high school, I made sure to stay very active. So I was on the soccer team. I played left midfield. For anyone who knows soccer, it requires quite a bit of running. And I was on the swim team. I was a lifeguard. So it was very important to me to stay active. At that point, at the end of high school and before starting college, my lung function was over 100% of normal. So I was very lucky, able to stay very healthy. Starting my freshman year of college, I was colonized with MRSA, and sort of that dual culture with the Pseudomonas I already had sort of threw my system for a loop. So starting freshman year, as I said, I had lung function over 100% of normal. By the end of freshman year, my FEV1 was around 75%, a little bit higher. So I was admitted to the hospital for the first time at 19 years old. After that, my lung function was able to bounce back up to low 90s. Unfortunately, sophomore year sort of followed a similar course, and my lung function dipped even more down into the low 60s, high 50s. At that point, I was hospitalized again and was able to regain about 20% of the lung function that I lost. But I guess to me, sort of that was a pretty rough 3 or 4 years. So I lost about a quarter to a third of my lung function at that time. My new baseline was around in the low 80s. So in the spring of 2014, I found out that one of my rare mutations, my G178R, qualified me for Kalydeco, which is a precision therapy. It's a gene therapy, and it was a complete game changer. So I remember taking it for the first time over the summer of 2014, and overnight I could tell a difference. So I woke up the next morning and spent about an hour hacking up some pretty gross stuff, but felt amazingly better after that. So I went back into the doctor and got my lung function tests, and my FEV1 was again over 100% of normal. So the lung function that I had lost in undergrad I'd gotten it back with this new magic pill. I was telling my friends at the time, if you want to know what magic looks like, Google image search Kalydeco pill. It really has made quite a difference for me and my family. Both of my brothers are on it as well. My youngest brother was fortunately able to start taking it right before sort of he hit puberty. So, within a few months of taking it, he shot up at least 6 inches. I mean, it was quite a dramatic difference for him as well. So since then, I'm able to work full time. The last sick leave I had to take was for a couple of days because I had the flu a few weeks ago. So, I've been able to stay very healthy and sort of live a normal, productive life. And I guess for me, sort of this precision medicine has given me, it sort of allowed me to reprogram my mentality. So in undergrad and, my whole life really, I wanted to be a doctor. So I was very interested in medical school and medicine and public health. But struggling in college sort of forced me to reevaluate my life on sort of maybe a more abbreviated timeline than I had appreciated in high school. So since starting Kalydeco, I've been able to sort of reevaluate my life again on, this sense of of being able to pursue the career path that I want and have a family, and maybe I'll be able to have kids someday at this point. So it's been very exciting for me. Additionally, it's alleviated a lot of the burden on my family. So before starting Kaleido, sharing a room, more or less a house with my brothers was difficult because I was colonized with MRSA, which they weren't. So my mom had us carry around cough cloths, and that, I'd cough into that and breathe through that while I was around them, but it was a little bit stressful. And sort of that has been resolved. So recently my family was able to take a trip to New Zealand, actually. We got cozy on that 14-hour flight, and it's an amazing place, by the way. If you get the opportunity to go, it's highly recommended. But I absolutely loved it. It's a very adventurous, sort of outdoorsy culture and feel. And I was talking about this with my parents there and a family friend who is a Kiwi. So he's native to New Zealand. And, I was sort of joking around saying, well, wouldn't it be great if I could move here for a few years? And not so surprisingly, the conversation turned to healthcare and what that's like in New Zealand. And it came up that Kaleido isn't covered in New Zealand. The government decided that because of the exorbitant cost, it put too much burden on the public healthcare system. And so that really hit home, I guess, for me and my family, that this is great. I mean, this medicine has changed my life and it's changed my brother's life. But, there's sort of this continued fear that, what if the carpet is ripped out from under me? What if this isn't sustainable? But anyway, so sort of it's been a wonderful, wonderful gift. But there is sort of that looming fear in the back of all of our minds that, maybe somebody will decide that it's not worth it. It's not worth the monetary cost. But anyway, that's my story.
I think people here have a sense of cost. Kaleido, I think you said you take 2 pills a day and each pill is $500. So that's $1,000 a day, correct? Yeah.
Yeah, correct. Fortunately, it has cut out a lot of the other therapies I have to do. So I know we saw in Breck's video the, hours of morning and evening routine. And I've been able to completely cut that out of my life, which is wonderful.
So you're not doing
me.
a vest anymore?
No, well, I have a dog and she keeps me quite active. Okay. So I still do some airway clearance, excuse me. But as far as the nebulizers go, I don't need them anymore. So.
That's great. I remember when we were talking about this, you said during college, especially I think when you were a freshman, you shared a room, and having a vest, doing PT with a roommate, and all that goes on in college is not very easy. So, yeah,
no,
that's
it's not.
Great. Okay. Thanks so much, Kirsten. I'm going to ask Erin to come up. You heard people talking earlier about N of 1 studies, and we want to show you personalized medicine that can happen, especially if you have a learning network that supports that effort. So
Kristen's story is really interesting, and one of the reasons that medication helps her is because she has the right mutation for it. And there's something like 1,800 different mutations for CF, and you have to have a combination of 2 mutations in order for CF to manifest itself in disease. And so right now, my son, I have a son who's going to turn 6 on Monday, who has cystic fibrosis, and he does not have a mutation that is currently helped by any of the medications that correct the gene at the cellular level. So I collect a lot of information on my son, and I started doing this when I was realizing as we would go to the doctor's office, they would ask me questions like, how long have you had this cough? And my answers would be a few days. Or when was the last time that you missed school? Sometime last month. I didn't have specific information on anything that they were asking, and we're asked to see the doctor quarterly. So there's 3 months in between visits, and in addition to my son, who's who's 6 and has CF. He has a twin sister. He has a sister who's 18 months older and a brother who's 2 years younger. So there's a lot that happens in my house in a day, let alone in a 3-month period with a child with a chronic illness. So I started to look for ways to quantify the information that they were giving me, or I'm sorry, that I had that I was trying to give to them. And I was using a tool called Orchestra, and you can see some of this here. I was trying to say, like, record when he was on and off different medications. So he's unfortunately colonized with a bacteria called a Chromobacter that is resistant to just about every medication that exists. He cycles inhaled antibiotics in 2-week periods, so he's on for a week and then he's off for a week. I can quantify his cough just based, right now it's on my interpretation of it. So what does it sound like? Right now it's at his baseline, but is there a mild increase from baseline or moderate to severe? And then I can talk to his doctor in terms that she understands and that we can problem solve together. So an example of how I've used this data, I use it to understand a change in his symptoms. So it was about a year ago when I was starting to notice down here, his cough frequency was kind of all over the place, and I didn't know why. So I started to troubleshoot with his doctor a little bit, and we decided that, it had been, on average, he is hospitalized about twice a year for a 2-week course of IV antibiotics, and it had been about 6 months since his last hospitalization, so we thought maybe his bacteria was just flaring. So we started an IV antibiotic, but I remember vividly describing to her that his cough was different, that it wasn't tight, that it wasn't wet and junky, the typical questions that they ask. It was just different, but I couldn't put my finger on how. And it was all over the place. So it wasn't a standard, like a consistent elevated cough. So we started to, I started to record different things that were happening. So you can see on this date, we added an oral antibiotic, and there was no change down here in his symptoms. This is when we started an IV antibiotic. And again, this is just a choice we made. We chose IV Zosyn and tobramycin. He doesn't typically respond to those. He typically responds to ceftazidime. But given that there's only one antibiotic that he responds to, and he's 6 years old, it's terrifying to think about him becoming resistant to that medication as well. So we started this, and after 2 weeks, we still weren't noticing a major change in his symptoms. At one point, we added magnesium to see if we could help to potentiate some of the antibiotic. And then finally, after we stopped the IV antibiotic, we added prednisone. And still, you can see this carried on beyond this graph, this increased cough, and we couldn't figure out what it was. So I talked to his doctor a little bit about it, and she suggested that maybe we try to see, she was asking me if I noticed a difference, if he was coughing more in the morning or if it was at night. So I added a new tracker 3 times a day, and as you can see, I got no useful information from doing that. It was all over the place. There wasn't a consistent elevation in that. So sort of under the threat of hospitalization, again, so that they could monitor his symptoms more closely, I went back and I started to look at his historical data to see what happened around the time that the cough developed that maybe we had missed, because the disruption that a 2-week hospitalization causes in our lives is, I can't even begin to tell you. It impacts every single aspect of our life. So I went back to look at our data, and I realized that we had stopped Prevacid right around the time that the cough had started. And I remember vividly having a conversation with the doctor about this, because he had always been on Prevacid his whole life, since he was born in the NICU, always been on Prevacid. And I said, how will we know that he doesn't need Prevacid? And she said, well, there will be a change in his bowel movements. So people with cystic fibrosis often take a PPI to help the enzymes make it through the stomach acid and help with your digestion. So you'll notice a change in his bowel movements. So I wasn't listening for a cough. I was looking in the toilet, and I didn't notice any change in his bowel movements. Well, you'll be pleased to know that after we restarted Prevacid and gave it to him with regular consistency, he hasn't been hospitalized in a year. Now it's been 1 year. His birthday last year was when he was hospitalized, and he turned 6 on Monday. It's been a whole year. There hasn't been one missed dose of Prevacid. I can't say with certainty that Prevacid was responsible for that, but it's the hypothesis that we came up with. So it helps us to identify the questions to ask. The historical data that I have now, I have millions and millions of data points on my kid, and this is just one example of how we've used it before. We've used it to avoid hospitalizations when they want to treat him with the protocol for the averages. This is our standard protocol. He needs to be admitted. No, he responds better to this treatment. I know that's your protocol, but this is my kid. He's not an average. He's an individual. And I can go back and look at how different IV antibiotics help him respond to different things. So these little yellow dots I could hover over them and they tell me what antibiotic he was on at any given time. This combination of IV antibiotics didn't get his cough back down to baseline. This combination got him back down to baseline, and it was for an extended period of time. So now the next time we do this, we know where to start instead of just guessing again, making a best guess at whatever it might be that we're supposed to do. So that's how I'm using my interpretation of precision medicine. It's really more about personalization of treatment options versus molecules. I'm hopeful that molecules and medications will be coming for us sooner rather than later. But in the meantime, I think that there is enough information that exists today, either both from patients and from the medical institute, that is poorly organized. And if it was organized better, we could learn a whole lot more from a whole lot faster than doing this clinical research to actually try to determine what medications are appropriate for the individual. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Erin. That's terrific. As Erin mentioned, another story she shared, I think a few years ago at the CERT, was when they were on a family vacation and Drew got sick and they went to CHOP. They wanted to admit him, and you had your graphs and were able to share with them what was really going on and what he needed and avoid more interrupting of the family vacation. So personalized medicine, that's another description of how that can happen. We recognize that there are many diseases that can be helped by personalized medicine, and we wanted to ask a colleague, Andrea Goodman, who's with Genetic Alliance, working with PCORI and PCORNet, to talk a bit about what they do before we come back to the story of cystic fibrosis. So, thanks.
Great. Thanks, Carol.
Thank you, Andrea.
Great. Hi, everyone. So I'm here to talk about our organization today, really as an example of the kind of umbrella advocacy organization that has been discussed a lot today. I think Genetic Alliance is a good idea or example of a framework for engaging the patient and elevating the patient voice in everything we do. And as Erin mentioned earlier, we think frequently about how we can move to where the patient is rather than moving the patient to our conversations. So Genetic Alliance has a 30-year history. We work with many of your institutions, if not all of them, working with support and advocacy organizations, as well as directly with patients and families. And our mission is to transform health by engaging individuals, families, and communities. What that really means is centering all of the work that we do around the participant, jargony, but the participants, the family, the community, and we believe that everything we do is more impactful that way. So we actually work now more frequently at the national and local levels, but still provide the bridge and believe that our role is to elevate community, individual, and family voices to all levels of systems. And we have a network of over 10,000 partners in this space, from industry to local advocacy organizations. I'll talk in a little bit about exactly how we use that network. But we believe that our network of partnerships is what keeps our real connection to communities and to patient and family voices. So why do we do it? We know that we have a long way to go. This has already been the topic of conversation today. We work very closely with PCORNet, and we will be working with the PMI and other initiatives to move this forward. But we know that people still are seeking meaningful connections. They don't feel fully integrated into the care or services they're receiving, and don't necessarily see themselves as part of the solutions that we all propose in rooms together. And we believe strongly that we need infrastructure to do this. So Genetic Alliance leads the development of tools and resources and works in partnership to deploy tools and resources that are direct to consumer, as you might say, or work in concert with patients, families, and other communities for increased access. Here's a map you can see of some of the tools and resources that we offer. Some of them are Genetic Alliance managed alone, and some are managed in partnership. I'm not going to go into detail about all of these. They're available on our website. An example of one that is both for patients and researchers is our PEER, our platform for engaging everyone responsibly, which is a customizable registry tool that is able to customize at the granular and dynamic level for patients, so they can choose when they're sharing their data. They can choose what data they're sharing, and change that over time. And then another one I just wanted to spend a minute on today is Disease Info Search, which is the kayak of the disease and condition world. It acts as an aggregator. It's a website, and acts as an aggregator for all information. So I chose to pull up cystic fibrosis information today in a quick search on Disease Info Search. We're actually moving to, we're redesigning and moving to a tab-based format. But right now, when you search cystic fibrosis, you get general information, and then you move to vetted advocacy and support organizations we work with around the condition, as well as scientific literature and clinical trial information that's relevant to those living with the condition. You can also sign up for alerts when new information comes in on a specific disease or condition. And although we work really closely with most of you already, I just wanted to post here some of the tools we have for communicating with partners, and we hope to continue partnerships that will lead to advancing in our tools and resources for patients and families. Thank you.
Terrific. Thanks so much, Andrea. Stefan, if you can come up. The next person that I'd like to introduce is Emily Kramer-Galinkoff, who some of you may have met 2 years ago with Aaron and others on a panel. And we asked Emily to come back, and I think you've heard when we think about cystic fibrosis about daily life challenges, some of the promise of personalized medicine from Kirsten. And Emily, maybe you can tell us about why we need to continue to focus on this.
Hi, it is so nice to see all of you again. I'm actually going to start with a video.
Hi there, and welcome to the White House. We're incredibly excited about this event and the Precision Medicine Initiative overall.
Hi, I am so honored to be here. I am a 30-year-old with advanced stage cystic fibrosis, and as you may have heard, there have been really enormous game-changing breakthroughs, but unfortunately I have a rare mutation of this rare disease, and there haven't been any breakthroughs for us. And though standing up here, I probably look like your average healthy 30-year-old, the reality is that my lungs are deteriorating, my condition is progressing, despite my hardest efforts to delay it.
Emily is like this fireball, and then you like kind of take a step back and realize that she's really sick, and it's hard to like imagine how sick she is.
Right now I have advanced stage CF, and that is the last stage before end stage CF.
When she doesn't feel well, it's very scary because she's sort of teetering on a very fine line of being very, very sick.
One thing that weighs on me heavily is thinking about what would happen to my parents if something happened to me or to my siblings. Like, that makes me super emotional because I can only imagine how hard that would be for them.
Like, I'm the mom. I'm supposed to protect her, you know?
The thought that one infection could set her over and the scientific advances may not come soon enough for her is really frightening.
That was the wake-up moment for me and my family to realize that the trajectory of the science was like longer than I could wait. We realized that we could be the connectors. We could be the people saying, here is an area that desperately needs research. We will provide the funding. We will provide the cell assets. We will bring you all together. And I think that role of coordinating all of that and just shining a light on the issue is perhaps our biggest and most important role. So these last 4 years, and especially these last few months, we've been operating in overdrive. In just the past year, we hit the $2 million mark, a testament to the power and passion of our incredible entourage. We held our second scientific symposium, spurring collaboration and the exploration of novel treatments and technologies by leading researchers from a variety of disciplines around the world. We've funded and I've personally donated millions of my own nasal epithelial and iPS cells to top academic institutions around the world. We were featured on People.com, Time.com, Yahoo Health, and CBS's nationally syndicated show, The Doctors. And I was deeply humbled to be named a Precision Medicine Champion of Change by the White House, as you heard. And those are just the highlights. And it's a good thing, because as my disease progresses and scary new things pop up, and they do, it's clear that the path forward is a treacherous one, and it's only getting tougher. This monster of a disease has a mind of its own, and it rears its head whenever it pleases. It doesn't care about dreams or plans, about important moments or life goals. Beasts reason with no one. Not even the most dogged of persuaders, and I assure you, I've certainly tried. I need a breakthrough, and I need it fast. But the reality is, this is much bigger than just about me. I happen to have 2 copies of a nonsense mutation of CF. As you may know, nonsense mutations are the cause of approximately a third of all genetic diseases. So that means that research on my mutation could reveal insights that apply not just to me or people with my mutation, or even CF more broadly, but many people suffering from many genetic diseases caused by nonsense mutations as well. That is huge, and it highlights an important point. Science isn't linear, and just like in design, where you start by studying the super users, research on rare disease can shed light on new pathways or understandings or lines of inquiry that trickle down to large groups of people and have major impact. I'm here today to embody the urgency and hope of precision medicine, the human lives that are at stake, and the unique ability that patients and families have to ignite the fire. Precision medicine is my hope for a future. Thank you.